monstrous push that you can make after you hit turn 5 and conditioning rank 2 comes online.
Definitely agree. We do know that Surrender is running N'Zoth, but with that kind of, at least weird from our perspective, it's not necessarily weird because established lists are not really out there yet because the mini set is so new. Inclusion of the Venomous Scorpids instead of Crush, nice that we got the cameras immediately. And he is apparently just keeping Mutinous in the opener. Not every Rush Warrior is running Mutinous, but Surrender has that in there as well as in his Rogue. He'd have to imagine paying respect to OTK Demon Hunter. Not that it's a guaranteed win condition, but it's an additional way to maybe try and sneak a win out there. Eating up Il'gynoth, of course, instantly wins you the game, but even something like a Moarg or a Talented Arcanist can delete like an important removal tool from your opponent's hand.
Yeah. I mean, well, first of all, I just want to say a swift shame on you, production, for messing up the blitzchung camera there. Imagine making a content piece with blitzchung and having tech issues and having to redo certain aspects of it because you got that wrong. That would never happen to me.
Wait, I'm confused now. This isn't Rush Warrior, there's a Barov.
Oh. Let me take a look at the lists real quick, just so that we can get this sorted out, because you are right. Surrender was playing the Rush Warrior.
He is. So is this blitzchung on the Warrior and he's on Control? And then Surrender's on the OTK? Oh, I'm so confused.
I think that has to be what's actually happening here, yeah. So I think the cameras were actually correct the first time around.
But the archetypes were not, yeah.
Yes, yeah, if I had to guess, because blitzchung, yeah, this is just straight up his Control Warrior. So apologies for that. I'm sure we'll get that sorted out as soon as possible, if that is what is actually happening. Again, the match tracking sheet for us is saying that it is Warrior, Surrender's Warrior, but quite clearly this is not the case. So as soon as we get official confirmation, we will let you know what is happening, because we're in the same boat right now.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to reset now. I got very tripped up because Surrender's still running Scorpid in his Rush Warrior, but this is blitzchung and on the Warrior. So let's just ignore the cameras for now and go to the matchup, because this is actually the one that I was very curious to see between Possessi and Give Please, where I was thinking that if the Demon Hunter is not running Ooze, I feel like the Control Warrior gets there by just kind of forcing them into awkward situations at the end game with the Bulwark of Azzinoth and with incremental hand space issues, because they are running things like Southsea Scoundrel that kind of force the Demon Hunter to keep their hand at 9 cards or less.
Well, one thing I will say is that for blitzchung, if nothing else, he's keeping up in terms of the stats. Obviously, the as you said, Bulwark is the main game plan here for the for the Control Warrior to be able to outlast the burst OTK that Surrender could go for with his Demon Hunter. But, you know, going for a tempo game plan is worth a fair amount in its own right. You can obviously supplement either the Bulwark plan or the Mutinous plan to eat Il'gynoth with this tempo game plan, which he's doing very successfully so far.
And kind of resetting and taking a look at blitzchung's list, he's actually, my apologies, not actually running a lot of the cards that we're used to seeing these days. He's got the Vol'jin and Scorpid combo to still pull out Rattlegore there at the top end. And so no Scoundrels, and so the hand space is less of an issue for Surrender, but the fact that there is Rattlegore means that blitzchung has access to a tempo, I want to say, game plan if he's able to pull that out early with Vol'jin. But without the Scoundrels, I start to think that this does have to eventually rely on Mutinous getting some big work done, if not the Bulwark, forcing Surrender to take some fatigue.
Yeah, blitzchung has the maximum disruption game plan, as you said, with both Vol'jin and Mutinous ready to go. But I was a little surprised to see him trade in the Kargath as opposed to the Scorpid on this turn, because obviously Scorpid can be killed off with just a hero power plus the weapon from Surrender, whereas the 4/4, I don't know, it's not going to get a lot done, make no mistake, but there's no way for Demon Hunter to silence anymore now that Dispel Magic is no longer in Standard. And so I thought sticking the 4/4 body did make some amount of sense.
I'd also be inclined to agree, and I'm thinking that perhaps blitzchung was looking at the stage dive immediately, pulling the Kargath Prime just so he has it in hand and can coin it out as soon as possible, because even though it can get silent, it can get silenced, I feel like that's the less relevant part of it, right? It's just the 10-10 that's really, really hard for OTK Demon Hunter to deal with. We are seeing for Surrender, though, he still does have Ooze in his OTK Demon Hunter. Again, got the list mixed up because I wasn't sure who was actually on the Demon Hunter, but that's a very, very big factor because he has a way to beat Bulwark. And so blitzchung does have to be on one of those scam win conditions, right? He can't just rely on Bulwark to outlast the Il'gynoth damage. It has to be Mutinous eating something very, very tasty, or just trying to beat down Surrender with early Kargath Prime, early Rattlecore.
That's true. That is very, very true. But we have seen, admittedly, this is quite clever. We have seen eating the Ooze with either the Vol'jin or the Mutinous itself being very impactful, obviously leading to the infamous loss for Surrender in this, for Tom, sorry, in this matchup that almost guaranteed him relegated out of GM. But blitzchung making a pretty surprising play here, where he's not just slamming down the Shield Maiden, because for him, getting down Kargath one turn earlier is just more impactful, which makes a decent amount of sense. It's a 12-11 at this point. And all of a sudden, his sacrificing off of the Kargath last turn starts to make a lot more sense.
Yeah, with that Athletic Studies and the coin saved. And for Surrender, it feels like as good a Stelina turn as you're going to get. You know what blitzchung has been planning for. There's only one outcome off the stage dive. I was underestimating it. It's not just a 10-10, like you said, 12-11. And he snipes the Kargath. Goodbye to blitzchung's game plan.
That one stings. Even with the Red Gill Razorjaw able to kill off the Stelina Shield Maiden able to come down, this is not even close to the kind of level that you're looking at in terms of power to beat down an OTK Demon Hunter. You need something much scarier.
And while we were talking about blitzchung needing to have scam win conditions, well, the early Kargath has been delayed, if not completely deleted from that possibility list. So for blitzchung, the question becomes now how to time this Mutinous, because he's not getting there on pressure. He has Shield Maiden and pretty much just these Outrider Axe charges, which I do think blitzchung still needs to be using for draw power. It looks pretty good on this turn. But when does the Mutinous come down, right? How will you have information on whether or not Il'gynoth could be in hand? It's really, really difficult to tell. Like, usually for Priest, Illucia is a bit easier to maneuver because you can dump several cards at once. But with Mutinous, you're blind and you don't even know whether or not it's gonna... I mean, it's only gonna get rid of one card.
Right, with Priest, it's straight up a game of chicken. It's how long do you think you can wait before you are dead? And you want to wait as long as possible so you have the highest chance of hitting Il'gynoth, because you can always pull it from hand. But Mutinous, yes, it's obviously more likely that they have Il'gynoth the later the game goes on, but they're going to be drawing other cards as well. Their hand is going to get fuller and fuller of other minions. Surrender is going to be very greedy with the minions. He does not want to just throw them out willy-nilly this game. And so Mutinous, you know, it gets more likely to hit Il'gynoth, but it gets more likely to hit other cards as well as the game goes on. So it's a very, very difficult balance to try and strike for blitzchung.
And I'm starting to get a sense of deja vu, because when Tom's Ooze was pulled out by Vol'jin versus Chonsu, he had something like 4 Moargs in hand to kind of buffer the chances that something relevant would get eaten. But blitzchung's just slamming it on turn 7. Is it going to be the... It is the Ooze! Why is the Ooze cursed? It's cursed! There were 3 other minions in hand. That was a 1 in 4. That's enormous.
Is Mutinous the only card in the game with more lines of code than Zephyrus? Is it just programmed to figure out the best possible card to munch every time? Cthulhu, Alexstrasza, Ooze in this matchup. It just gets the best one every single time. Because now, you know, the hidden factor, if you're not aware, is the Bulwark of Azzinoth, which I guess is worth... looking up here for blitzchung. It basically allows you to completely outlast the Demon Hunter's OTK in the later stages of the game. Yes, they can use hero powers to chew through it, but without that Ooze, if you can put a board like this come the end of the game, sometimes they just die because they cannot chew through all those 4 or sometimes 5, if you get it off Corsair Cache, charges of the Bulwark.
A lot of the time even, because even a singular Shield Maiden, a lot of the time, by the time Demon Hunter has hit their combo, a lot of their like removal tools have been dumped in order to make hand space to draw towards that combo, and then they won't have any spare parts to be able to deal with that board, and a lot of the time they'll also just be fatiguing. And right now, Surrender, quite frankly, doesn't even have a way of dealing with this board that doesn't involve tossing away Moarg and Immolation Aura. Blitzchung with the Corsair Cache now has that Bulwark on demand, equipping it immediately.
Really?
Surprising to me though.
Is he that afraid? Like, Surrender has double Moarg in hand, sure, but he hasn't really drawn that much, right? I mean, I guess the argument from Blitzchung is he's just winning on board at the moment. Surrender clearly doesn't have an answer, so as long as he doesn't just die, he can kind of get there through aggression. But this seems like a very early equip of the Bulwark.
I'm shocked by this. These Moargs don't even both cost 0, right? They're off of the Raging Fell Screamer, the discount.
Yeah.
There's been 0 Skulls played for Surrender. That seems extremely early, and I think Surrender's back in this now. Like, he can hero power 4 times and not
very
die.
Easily.
Corsair Cache draws the other Outrider's Axe, but obviously Blitzchung does not want to overwrite his weapon, so he's doing nothing. Is he going to tempo Barov? Is that how bad this is? He is!
Really? Oh my goodness. Like, the other problem is, he has all these axe swings that want to go face. This is, what, 21 damage worth of axe swings that he could just levy towards his opponent? But now Surrender, Double Jump, Spectral Sight, Chaos Strike, Thalnos, the card draw is starting to roll in. He only has 10 cards left in the deck. The OTK is still very much alive.
It's not going to come any earlier than 4 turns, but Blitzchung's not doing anything in those 4 turns, right? He needs Rattlecore.
Yeah.
Exactly, Rattlecore or Kargath at this point, because Blitzchung's played all of his big threats. Okay, to be fair, like, the Barov is sort of a problem for Surrender because he wants to use this Chaos Strike on face, right? To get that Bulwark charged down a little bit. And the Barov is going to deal 3 minimum. As long as Surrender stays above whatever damage there is on board plus 3, though, he's generally safe. The only burst Blitzchung has is the Outrider's Axe. So I think Surrender's fine to wait.
Well, he has Troublemaker, right? So there's plus 6. I think is the max possible damage. But yes, you're not wrong.
That's enormous, though. Oh my goodness.
That is a gargantuan draw.
Wait, why is he coining? What? If you're going to hero power, you have to play the Rattlecore first before you coin hero power. I'm so confused, Tarek.
I know we're all excited for Nalgadan in Americas, but let's not coin up to 11 mana, all right?
It doesn't work. I'm pretty sure the Barov just trades and then he can play Rattlegore. I don't even see any particular need to hero power, but I guess the coin's not doing anything from this point. So sure, maybe it gives him some break points if you hero powers every turn.
Yeah, I think he was just thinking about going Minefield, coin Rattlegore, but obviously finds the correct order of going for the Minefield first and then the Rattlegore. But still, this is going to be a close one. Blitzchung quite clearly representing lethal next turn, and Surrender quite obviously cannot kill this Rattlegore. I mean, you can clear one level of it, but that doesn't make much difference. It's just about healing and surviving, but with double Skull in his bottom 7, it kind of looks like he might not be able to get there under all this pressure.
Maybe not. He's also just dead on board to Rattlegore and the swing, so he has to use I-Beam. I don't think Fellscream Blast is usable here on his own minions without deleting his win condition. Also, Blitzchung still has 3 charges of the Bulwark, so Surrender has to outlast the Rattlegore for 3 more turns, which is,
true.
I'm pretty sure, just not doable. Even if he top decks Il'gynoth and is not dead next turn, he can't kill Blitzchung. So I can't overstate just how crucial this Rattlegore top deck was for Blitzchung. It wasn't exactly Rattlegore that was going to make Surrender's life difficult because Kargath Prime and Troublemaker were also very threatening in this position, but Rattlegore is obviously the best one of them. It's not dead to any combination of removal.
Yeah, and I think I-Beam alone is a reasonable enough play on this turn, because it means that you are not dead to Outrider's axe, right? Yes, you are dead to Troublemaker, but they quite clearly do not have it in hand. So you are playing the outs here, and if they draw it off the top, then good for them.
Yeah, then that would have been the game either way, pretty much. So Surrender, I'm trying to think of what his outs could be to outlast this 9 damage again for 2 more turns, because there's still 2 charges on the Bulwark, and I honestly think it has to come off of some Discover, but there's both of the studies used, so it's just not happening.
It's just 1 turn too late. Even if he gets Il'gynoth here off of the Skull Reduction, which is fairly likely, misses anyway. He just needed 1 more turn to get through the weapon charges.
He has second Fell Scream now, though, so he can use one of them to clear.
Okay.
Okay, but it takes a lot of Moargs to do so. That's fine, because the Moarg off the skull actually costs 0, so he can retain that and copy it. So 2 Moargs gets the Fell Scream up to 4. With an Arcanist, it's like 12 points of clearing power, right? And Arcanist and 2 Moargs.
Mm-hmm. Demons. Demons.
So I think that's what he does. Like, Philosophy, 1/0 cost Moarg, an Arcanist, and then the Fell Scream Blast. So he heals for like 24, leaves an 8/8 Rattlegore. I am also unaware of how many Arcanists he actually needs to deal lethal. I'm just concerned with staying alive this turn, so my line might be completely wrong, though.
Okay, he's getting a similar process here, although it looks like he's only going for 1 Moarg and instead following up with the Immolation Aura. Okay, this heals for enough, even though it kills off his Moarg there.
Yeah. Surrender doesn't... He's not happy with the turn, but like obviously he had to contend with, is he even allowed to dump 2 Moargs by that point? One of the 0-cost ones is what I was suggesting.
Oh, wait.
Maybe he wasn't, right?
Did he miss the swing face? Because now there's still 2 charges, right?
Did he have mana remaining?
Well, I mean, whether or not he had mana, that should have been a priority on his turn, right?
I mean, not if he couldn't stay alive without using the mana, but I don't know.
Yeah.
It's super complicated, but in any case, it's really impossible now, right? Because it's still 2 turns because he didn't get that swing in. Whether or not he could have gotten the swing in and stayed alive and still had enough combo pieces for lethal remains to be seen. It needs closer review because, oh my god, Il'gynoth was straight up last card. That's just funny.
Yeah. It's funny for us, less so you'd have to imagine for Surrender. It's just GG. If he had hero powered last turn, he would have had lethal, right? He could have hit 36. Oh no, wait, which would have been a little bit short still anyway. I mean, either way, as close as it was there, heartbreakingly so for Surrender, it is going to be the win for blitzchung. A weird pan out, not one that I've seen before, obviously, given that Mutinous is a very recent inclusion, but just slamming down the Bulwark so early. It worked out beautifully this game, of course, for blitzchung. But that's kind of only because he got Rattlegore in the next 2 or 3 cards. If that had not happened, I think he would have just given Surrender plenty of time to chip that down over the next few turns and then go for lethal with his full combo.
This was so weird. I was talking about hoping we could get to see this matchup because I was interested in how it actually works out, because we were talking about Warriors probably favored, but then I realized, oh, Surrender's running Ooze, so I think Demon Hunter's probably favored. But then the Mutinous ate exactly the Ooze, so blitzchung's in a good spot. But then he played the Bulwark super early, so we were really worried because Surrender looked like he would have the time, but it all came down to this Rattlegore coming down super early that kind of made the Bulwark unnecessary almost. I mean, like, obviously it allowed blitzchung to live and also put the pressure on Surrender because he had the Rattlegore, but I'm pretty sure blitzchung could have gotten away with waiting many, many turns later for the Bulwark and been in an even better position.
Well, either way, Surrender's giving it another go. Very much hope that he can give his signature blow upwards onto his hair, as seems to be his best way to calm down after he's had a bad beat. Because, you know, that was a rough one. Losing to Control Warrior when you have Ooze in your Demon Hunter. it shouldn't happen. Realistically, that was a great matchup for Surrender that he just somehow managed to lose. Again, Mutinous, Rattlegore, it was a very fortunate outcome for blitzchung, but that's the way he built his deck. He gave himself a very good chance of being able to beat OTK Demon Hunter with his warrior and was able to steal the win. A big win, of course, to go 1-0 up, but I do think as a... if there's any solace for Surrender here, the Control Warrior was in a good spot. If it didn't hit the Demon Hunter, it would hit the Rogue. Even the Rush Warrior, I think, is a fine matchup, so probably at some point it was reasonably likely to get a win. But it still hurts. 0-1 down in the semi-finals for that spot in the Grand Finals against Possessi. It's going to sting.
Absolutely. Oh man, I'm still reeling from that last game, Derek. We didn't even talk about the Kargath game plan that was potentially so cool from blitzchung, but then got Stelina away. All the different paths that game could have taken, but we are now in this universe, in this pan out, where it is the Demon Hunter mirror, which we are all familiar with how it works in terms of the board not being a concern in the slightest. It is all about drawing towards the skull, towards the Il'gynoth, towards the combo pieces, and potentially sometimes disrupting your opponent with the likes of Stelina and Glide off of Illidari Studies.
And so one of the things we often see when you have Skull in your hand in either the middle or right position is keeping bad cards in the matchup. For example, Immolation Aura, essentially useless. You're just going to dump it down just because it guarantees an outcastable Skull. Any card that is not Il'gynoth there is fine, basically. And I think for Surrender, it's a safe play. And I also think it's probably a correct play just to get yourself the highest chance of Skull outcast on the left.
Very hard to mathematically actually say whether it's correct or not, because you also just risk having nothing to do until turn 6, whereas if your opponent has had Spectral Sights in that meantime, they're on average drawing towards their combo a lot faster. But obviously, you completely highlighted the upsides of that, which is not having any possibility for Il'gynoth to lock out the Skull. It seems honestly more like a matter of preference from some players, because I've seen, for example, like Give Please tossing cards that weren't actively good for him, even though it could possibly be replaced by Il'gynoth. As it happens, both of them have Il'gynoth relatively early, but for Surrender, the Skull is left of it, so I think he's going to have a much better time of this matchup.
Yeah, the Il'gynoth is a weird card, right, to have so early in the game, because as you correctly put, it's bad for blitzchung. Make no mistake, I'm not trying to say it's a good card for him, but it does allow some potentially cheesy outcomes. He has Raging Fell Screamer, he has Moog, he has Fell Scream Blast now as well. If he holds onto the coin, like, maybe we're looking at turn 7, turn 8 lethal if he holds onto the weapon as well. Like, he does not necessarily need to hit Skull to get lethal this game, is the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point with the Fell Screamer as well. Like, he kind of just needs Philosophy right now, and then a spell damage minion, and then holding onto the coin is also, like you said, very, very relevant. But it's really hard to do all of that with the hand space involved as well. So I think blitzchung's game plan will definitely just change based on how the next couple cards pan out. As for Surrender, though, the other Skull feels a little bit too ambitious, because this one will be locked in by Il'gynoth, but maybe you just take it as draw 3 at some point.
Yeah, I mean, the others just kind of suck. Like, I-Beam, yes, it's a combo piece that could maybe help you cheese out the win con 1 turn earlier, but that is also not likely to be outcast. So a 3-mana I-Beam, I kind of would rather have Skull of Gul'dan. Like, these others are just not doing anything. They're not especially dumpable either.
Yeah, even though this second Skull is very unlikely to be outcast, as long as there's hand space for Surrender, any draw is good draw, right? And then the first Skull might give him like very good combo pieces anyway, so as long as he hits enough of the pieces, whether or not the second half of them are discounted is not an issue. So I don't mind. Actually, I really like that he takes the second Skull.
Me too. Me too.
Screamer for blitzchung is all very straightforward. If we're counting damage, that's Philosophy and Talented Arcanist, that's 36, right? Not even counting the weapon swing. If he gets Ethereal Aug Merchant, I will get back to you on that. I think it's 24, and then with Hero Power Weapon Swing, that would be lethal. So blitzchung's like just a couple of cards away as it stands.
Right, but whether it's Ethereal Orc Merchant plus Hero Power or Talented Arcanist, both require 9 mana, so currently turn 8 is the earliest we're looking at if he holds on to the coin. Again, things get very, very close, very, very difficult to pass through. But on the other side, while blitzchung will be considering any other possibilities of how he can get lethal, Surrender is just turboing through his deck now. He hits not the greatest outcomes off of the skull, admittedly. Missing the Moarg sucks. Obviously, not having Il'gynoth to discount hurts as well. But he just has all the draw in the world. His only concern right now is making sure he has space in hand to do it.
blitzchung has a similar concern because we were talking about he can get there on turn 8, but that means drawing towards those combo pieces and retaining the coin, which is all a very tall order. He has to dump some of these. He can re-equip Eldraki, that's pretty good. Or just, okay, Philosophy is one of the things he needed, right? He's now either Arcanist or Og Merchant away, and then a lot of mana. That's the crucial point.
Oh, it's so scuffed, but it's kind of just getting there.
Really is, isn't it? 9 cards in hand, that is fine. We also are seeing studies on either side, so there's still some potential for Stelina nonsense. If it were not for this double jump, the 3 mana skull from the right maybe could have been outcastable for Surrender, but seems a lot harder to do. If it gets I-Beam, it's still doable. Oh, there's still the studies.
Yeah, still the studies in the way, but skull numero cuatro here for Surrender. That's obviously a little bit overkill, but at the same time, if you can make room for it, why not? More discounts, more ability to go for the combo that one turn earlier. I love it.
It's just good because he has Il'gynoth. Like, there's no super disastrous overdraw, and he's not going to overdraw anyway because the ooze is primo dumpable here. So 1 Morg and 2 talented Arcanists is, gosh, 5...
30?
30? It is, right? With 1 Fellscream Blast.
Yeah, not an oft-seen combo, but I think it does work out. And so for Surrender, the game plan is then waiting until turn 8 for his side. As we counted out, that is likely 1 turn before blitzchung can go for his own OTK combo if he gets the spell damage to go alongside it. So either way, this is going to be so close, especially when blitzchung gets skull off the top. If he can make hand space here, maybe he just gets the combo next turn.
He can't make hands. I mean, like in order to get the combo turn 8, he has to use the coin, right?
Right, but that's fine, because if you get 0 mana Arcanist, you can do it next turn instead, right?
Okay, yes. I mean, with the clarification that you give up on the original game plan and then try to hit the right discount to make it happen sooner, then absolutely. He's got Og Merchant now and Philosophy, but no Warblades pre-equipped, so it's not happening next turn just yet, I think.
Yeah, he would need to have already played the Philosophy as well. That 1 extra mana pushes it out the way.
Demons. Demons.
He would have I-Beam, but yeah, you're right. This first Moarg doesn't actually cost 0. So in order to play Philosophy, like he won't have mana to then play Fellscream Blast alongside 2 Moargs and an Ethereal Og Merchant. So not there quite yet.
16 burst.
Wait.
I think available next turn guaranteed for blitzchung. Surrender, though, has, again, so close the ability to get there, but I think no matter how I look at it, it's just not there this turn, is it?
I'm not seeing it. I mean, he has 2 Fellscream Blasts, but the way Arcanist works is that it's only the first spell you play that actually gets the spell damage +2, so I don't think he can do it.
18 plus 6. Is it 28? Like, it's...
I grow impatient.
It's close, actually, right? Because you deal 18 with the first Moarg Arcanist one, 6 with the second, and then he could have dealt 4 if he hadn't played the Chaos Strike with the weapon swing face. Like, I think that was really, really close.
It was certainly razor-thin margins. I talk about how breakpoints don't often matter in this matchup, but Surrender shaking his head because he thinks he's dead next turn. It's just that type of game where you kind of sniff out that your opponent has the things they need because they are willing to overdraw on 10 cards to kill you the next turn. Surrender is just going to go for Fell Scream with 1 Arcanist because he still has 36 next turn with the 2 Moargs.
Yeah, just trying to heal up as much as possible.
To be fair, 25 is a breakpoint, but as it happens, blitzchung would not have been able to kill either way.
Yeah, blitzchung knows it's just not quite there yet. Needs 1 more turn to be able to get there.
But it's 1 turn too many. No matter how I look at it, right, if you philosophy, like, let's say blitzchung didn't even start with draw this turn. He could play 2 Moargs and an Ethereal Aug Merchant, which is only 24. And then he wouldn't have mana to, like, play the Fell Scream Blast because the second Moarg would cost 2.
Indeed. Yep, just not quite able to get there. Surrender, just a double, triple check. 9, 18, 36 damage next turn. Nothing that blitzchung can do to get in the way. Stelina or Glide as both of the disrupt options, both 1 mana too expensive as well. So despite healing all the way up to 30, clearing the board, not enough. A volatile matchup, and Surrender gets the better of blitzchung.
Oh, so close, Derek. This is a very interesting game because we saw a pan out where Il'gynoth was in the opener for both players. blitzchung holding onto the coin for as long as he could to keep that option open for turn 8, even without any discounts other than the Raging Fell Screamer. But he deviated when he had the ability to outcast the Skull. Unfortunately, it was not fast enough versus Surrender. And very well played from both sides, I think. Surrender gonna move the series up to 1 apiece. But crucially, I think very similar to that last series between Possessi and Ghiblis, I think the Demon Hunter is the deck that's kind of hardest to get a win with, even more so for blitzchung because he's not got an Ooze in there. Although I guess Surrender's not on Control Warrior, so it all evens out.
Oh, never underestimate the Kresh Turtle Spike. Although Surrender isn't even playing that in his N'Zoth Warrior. I don't know what's going on anymore. But I do agree with you absolutely that Demon Hunter could be in with a rough spot here. It could take the win against either the Rogue or the Warrior. And of course, blitzchung still has his own Rogue that he has to take the win with. It's just 1 game apiece for the players here. But I do think the more I see current iterations of OTK Demon Hunter against Rush Warrior, I don't know if the draws have been better recently, the plays have been better recently. I just think that the OTK Demon Hunter kind of struggles to get enough removal in the mid game, and if they do manage to survive, they've used up too many of their combo pieces, so they struggle to actually get the OTK because of the constant unending threats once rank 2 conditioning comes down. And so here for Surrender on that Rush Warrior that he is favored over the Control Warrior this week. We're going to see if it can take down the Demon Hunter for blitzchung in the okay matchup or the Rogue in the fantastic matchup. No matter what, I think the Rush Warrior here for Surrender is almost guaranteed a win.
Almost. It's worth noting that the list from Surrender is kind of unusual, so unusual that I nearly confused it for Control Warrior at the start of the game because he is running 2 Scorpids in there, which does have some synergy with N'Zoth, but you kind of have to ask, doesn't Crush have better synergy with N'Zoth? So again, I'm still trying to figure out what type of spell Surrender is actually looking to pull from the Scorpid, because I feel that the vast majority of Discover options from Warrior fit in better with Control archetypes, right? It's removal, it's often like board clears and AoEs, and Surrender often doesn't want to clear board because he'll already be ahead with his own rush minions, which clear board on their own. So I'm not sure. Maybe if the Scorpid can pull exactly conditioning or studies or stage dive, then it's great, but the odds of that are not very high. The poison is relevant in the mirror, but not so much in this matchup.
Not so much indeed. So Surrender looking for, obviously, I would say plan A is the greedy plan as we've laid it out, where you want Watley, you want conditioning, you want to be able to build up these overwhelmingly strong boards in the mid game. But do you think with a hand like Parade Leader and Stage Dive, you would hold on to it just to try and put some kind of threats down in the early game, or do you just full mull for the more powerful mid game?
It's really close. I was going to say I didn't mind the Parade Leader as a turn 2. The stage dive felt a little bit weaker because it's like you're kind of conceding you have very little opportunity to get Gunarg on one and get the ideal curve, but it is immediately corrupted by Parade Leader, so that's a plus. And for Surrender, he did pick up Athletic Studies, so he's gotten actually the opposite of the greedy game plan, but it's still cohesive in the sense that it curves out, so this is still potentially very strong.
Still potentially very strong. Yeah, I agree completely. This Rakara, it's exactly the kind of matchup where Rakara shines brightest, being able to punish your opponent not instantly removing your board, because make no mistake, Demon Hunter cannot afford to remove every minion the turn it comes down. They have to let the Rush Warrior build up, then sweep away the boards. And so Rakara can get huge amounts of value in this matchup, presenting very, very scary boards that all get buffed up at once.
Surrender starting with the Parade Leader obviously looked like the game plan ever since he kept it, but honestly I was intrigued by the ETC top deck because that's a health range that's not killable by Chaos Strike with Hero Power or I-Beam from blitzchung. But I think the idea for Surrender is because he's on the play, it would still take the coin from blitzchung to deal with the Parade Leader immediately, which is a very valuable resource when you're looking to just turbo out Skull every matchup. So works out great for Surrender here. He can stick the Parade Leader, get Rakara down, you'd have to imagine, unless the stage die gives any better options.
The 3-4, which goes up to a 5-4. Like, it's a lot of stats on board, but I think going for the Rakara because it means that it doesn't just die to a Hero Power or a Fell Screen Blast next turn is probably worth a little more, right?
Yeah, I also really dislike the bumper card because it would essentially waste the Athletic Studies discount.
Sure.
You can't play the other one if he plays one first, so Rakara now and then double bumper card next turn would have been available, but that's interesting. He's valuing the stats on the other minion and not immediately the Parade Leader.
I guess realistically, if you did go for Rakara, there was still a decent chance that the Parade Leader does die. And this still allows you to go for Bumper Car ETC next turn. Like, it floats a mana now, but it does not necessarily mean that your mana is going to be poorly spent over the next couple turns. But I do agree. I think if it was up to me, I still would have gone for Rakara.
That's fair. I mean, Rakara herself would have been kind of vulnerable. Maybe that's the thinking for Surrender, just on 3 HP. Even if blitzchung deals with the Rakara and leaves up the Parade Leader, then Surrender maybe feels like he didn't get enough value from the Rakara. But we shall see a little bit later on. The 4 health stat line is relevant here because blitzchung can't just Chaos Strike Hero Power the 5-4. There's potential for a double Throglaive and Chaos Strike clear here, though, which looks pretty clean to me, even if it comes at the cost of the coin.
Short. I grow impatient.
Yeah, Throglaive. I mean, you could go Throglaive Hero Power Fell Screen Blast, which still then allows you potentially to save the skull, the coin for Skull. But I guess Illidari Studies maybe does a similar thing, and at that point, you know, you're using a lot of removal pieces just to keep the fastest skull possible intact. So I think blitzchung's line here, using slightly less important removal pieces, does make sense.
Yeah. It's so funny to say that Ivy and Fell Scream are less important because they're combo pieces, but that's actually right in the situation of the game where you are nowhere near being able to get the combo done, and so Throglaive has a lot more clear potential than a singular I-Beam, and this is also a turn where he's able to play the clunky I-Beam for full cost and it's still relevant, whereas later on it's really hard to get that in outcast position and Throglaive will be more valuable. So I think it's a good line from blitzchung. Surrender, one way or another, is back to the drawing board. No immediate minion to buff with Rakara. So I wonder once again if he ever like tempos ETC because it has health on it. Like a lot of health.
Yeah, it's weird, right? I think I'm kind of looking a little bit more closely at Bumper Card Double Dark Moon, because the next turn, if there isn't the clear, you can go, obviously, Rakara ETC, and you get the full double benefit. You have more minions that you can buff, and you get a triple attack with ETC, with all the rush minions. Obviously, one of them can die to the hero power, but then you still stick the same amount of minions anyway.
It's true. I think this is the line you take when you feel that blitzchung has used a lot of removal, and so you're very likely to stick at least 2 minions here.
Yeah.
I can see blitzchung's hand, so I was suggesting a different line, as we are wont to do. But blitzchung also doesn't deem this worthy of removing, so it works out great for Surrender, at least in terms of immediate damage pushed.
Yeah, it's a very nice gambit. I think it's still the correct play over Tent Trasher. You just get so much immediate stat buff. And it's, you know, both the Tent Trasher and the Rikara do kind of force your opponent off of just jamming Skull on the next turn. But, you know, Rikara punishes it even more, I think. If they just ignore that board, they're going to tank huge amounts of damage.
Yeah. Yeah, not just Rikara, the ETC itself. This looks extremely powerful. The one downside is that Rikara herself is not buffed, so she is dead to, like, hero power and then swing of the weapon. But then, if that's the turn from blitzchung and it doesn't involve Skull, I think that's a win. She's gotten the job done. Surrender going to take his time, make sure that he's not missing anything. We are used to this considered approach from one of our star players here in APAC. But it is going to be the line you suggested. And now blitzchung will be very thankful he held onto this Throwglaive.
He will. It's a little weird as to how you're supposed to actually use it, right? Well, I guess the first thing to ask is actually, can you just get away with Skull? And what can you hit off the top to make it that much more acceptable? I do think it's a little bit too risky. Unless you hit exactly Aura, you are in big, big trouble.
I agree. And so we do look at the Throwglaive turn instead, which is admittedly still kind of awkward. He can shoot the 2/2/2s, of course, and then once on Rikara, but then you don't even need to necessarily shoot Rikara because you can just hero power swing into her anyway. So I think, yeah, digging with studies is a bit better.
Sure.
Look for I-Beam. He can go Spectral Sight, actually, because he doesn't need the Skull discount for next turn. Oh.
Is he just playing Skull?
Okay. Wow. Wowie, wowie. Okay, he can clear Rikara. That's a big deal. Unfortunately, the Aug Merchants cannot give themselves spell damage because they only have 1 HP.
Okay, you play one Aug Merchant there, sure. Yeah, you just chill for a turn. As long as you don't die here, which is... How much damage actually is this? 12, 13. Yeah, you're not dying on this turn. But you can tank a lot here and then hopefully heal back up with... second Skull into Moarg into Fellscream Blast. You know, if he went for Skull last turn, he can try it again here.
So basically, each of these 2 attack minions is actually 4 attack. So it's like 13 damage from the ETC. I do think Surrender will respect the 2-1. I'm just not sure how. Because I could hear an argument for any of these 4-cost cards being played. Like the Tent Trasher is most attack on board, but you kind of don't want to rush that into the 2-1 if anything will trade in, because it's of a stat line where it survives against Moarg and Immolation Aura, for example. The Sword Eater, you do get the weapon damage in, but it feels a lot better to swing to the face rather than getting rid of the 2-1. And then the Samuro does look like something that wants to trade into the 2-1, and it's also immediately pushing 2 damage because of the ETC.
It's so low attack, though. I think I like the Sword Eater just because the Taunt Body is actually worth quite a bit when your opponent has the weapon equipped. Surrender looked like, honestly, he could have gone either way up until the last second, mousing over Sword Eater, deciding on Samurai at the end. It's not bad at all. It pushes immediate damage and still demands an answer from Surrender, from blitzchung. If he's going to go for the Skull here, obviously it could go fantastic if he hits exactly Moarg Artificer. But outside of that, he's in some big trouble.
Big, big trouble indeed. Even the Crimson Sigil Runner can't be given spell damage. The Thalnos is spell damage, so he can like swing into ETC, but then the 2 health minions are very far apart, so it's good positioning from Surrender to make the Fellscream really be awkward here.
So he's got Surrender, Thalnos, Fellscream Blast, and then
Throwglaive a bunch of times.
Yeah, only twice, but yeah.
Sorry, a couple times is enough here, right?
It's enough, yeah. Keeps him alive for sure.
1 minion left on board by then, which you'd have to imagine is a 1/2 Samuro.
Yep, that sounds fine. I guess you could make that argument for leaving up the bumper card because you don't want to give them the 1/1s.
Oh, he's saving the Fell Scream altogether.
Wow. Okay.
He's not dead to anything this turn. Like, Alex and Troublemaker are not available.
Yep, ETC already gone as well, so you're correct. He's not dead, but he's close. He's very close.
Playing with fire is something you have to do with OTK Demon Hunter. blitzchung saying,
Correct.
if I use this Fell Scream Blast for just 6 healing, I'm not winning in the long run anyway. Like, he needs this Fell Scream Blast to give him the time to actually play the Skull. So he's holding out one more turn to get Moarg from the Skull and actually heal for a relevant amount with the Fell Scream Blast. I think it's very smart.
I think it's very clever.
Also, for Surrender, yeah, just this refill, maximum stats on board. He saw blitzchung have to scrape together a partial board clear. And he is just putting all the pressure on blitzchung to deal with this. He held onto the Fell Scream. There's a talented Arcanist.
Does that ever push you off of Skull on this turn? It allows you to deal 4 damage with the Ethereal Arcanist as well, which is a big break point, obviously, looking at this board with the Fell Scream Blast.
Yeah, that would be 12 points of healing as well.
Demons.
It leaves you very weak to Troublemaker the next turn, but it's really a gambit if blitzchung feels like he can just get away with Skull this turn. It has to not just be Moarg, right? Well, I guess it could just be Moarg, and then Ethereal and Fell Scream is also accomplishing the same thing that Talented would this turn.
Yeah, it's a huge risk. Honestly, I am not certain that this play is better from blitzchung. If you just have to go straight up Skull next turn, if they have the Troublemaker, maybe that's too slow. And this obviously heals a lot less than Moarg could afford you as well. It's a very, very fine margin. I like that he's tempoing out the 1/1 here just as an extra minion in the way for the Troublemaker 3/3s, just to try and give him that time to play Skull.
A very safe play, but... And I mean, it kind of works out in the world where there's no Troublemaker from Surrender, and then healing for this amount is enough to get the Skull done anyway, but having floated this much mana feels like a bit of a disaster. Surrender now has second Sword Eater into Tent Trasher available. Just pile on the pressure every single turn. He's not seen a Skull yet, so I think the game plan continues. It's only a matter of whether he trades into the Arcanist, which has 1 spell damage on it. Oh, sorry, he can't play second Sword Eater and Tent Trasher. There's already a Pirate on board. That's my bad.
Yeah, we don't want to make the...
Riders and... Maybe 1 Rider and a Tent Trasher then? Sure.
As long as we don't make the Possessy play, I think we're happy here, where you try to double discount with the same minion type.
Wasn't the same minion, to be fair. 2 different Murlocs.
Yeah, different species, same family.
Alright, blitzchung bought himself this. Oh, the more was the next card. That's so rough.
Yeah.
But now, Alexstrasza is just available next turn, and without the Fell Scream Blast, he's not getting out of range. Not even an I-Beam. You can pull an I-Beam from double jump?
He can, which he has to be looking at very carefully, because this is an obvious breakpoint in the form of Alexstrasza, so trying to find some kind of a healing for that is obviously utmost priority. But at the same time, if you don't think that you can beat Alexstrasza anyway, it's a very valid line to just say, you don't have it, and I'm going to try and more consistently hit the OTK next turn. Hit Spectral Sight, which I think means that no matter what blitzchung does here, he will not have mana to be able to heal on this turn.
Yeah, I-Beam's unplayable if he gets it off of Spectral Sight. Just nothing doing. Surrender's counting. Okay, if this is I-Beam, if it's 1 Moarg, I don't beat that, right? Because he heals for 6 and then removes 2 off that side of the board. So Surrender would only have 13. If it's 2 Moarg, then he's probably losing the long game anyway. blitzchung just going for the clear, but Surrender has the weapon and the Alex in hand for 11 points of damage. He gives the nod, the sip of the tea, and we are going to game 4.
Oh my goodness, Surrender, that single game away from going through to the grand finals. A couple of weeks ago, again, as we've said, sending out that tweet saying that as more and more players get better than him, he felt relegation was inevitable, but he wasn't quite ready to go out of Grandmasters yet, so we hope that he could clutch it to stay in Grandmasters. He's done more than that. He got through to the playoffs with a second place to Possessi last week. Now, a single game away from going through to the finals. To see Possessi again, 2 weeks in a row, we could have an identical final here in APAC Grandmasters, and all he needs to do is get a win with this Rogue.
And I think this Warrior game was spectacularly played. Looking at this replay, we argued back and forth about what this turn would be. Would it be Samuro, Sword Eater, Tent Trasher? I think the Samuro choice ended up being a stroke of brilliance, because that's the one way you can actually get Samuro to push relevant damage, right? Is if you have ETC stuck on board. It also fulfilled the role of dealing with the minion, had a lot of health on it, and then Surrender was saying, if you clear this board, then I have the Sword Eater to follow up and the Tent Trasher. He kind of built 3 stages of boards by making the Samuro into that threat, into that one window where it actually was pushing damage. Blitzchung, I mean, to the point where Blitzchung was forced, I mean, I say forced pretty loosely, because he could have gone for a very, very ballsy skull instead and just made the read that if you don't have Alex Troublemaker, then this, sorry, if you don't have the immediate lethal, then the skull wins me the game more of the time. But against even just kind of an average hand from Surrender, where there was no good turn 8, but there was a really strong turn 9, using the Fellscream Blast for partial clears and floating 4 mana, not having enough tools to clear the next board, even if it was relatively meager, dealt the lethal to Blitzchung.
Well, here it is. The slightly different list from Surrender, Mutinous the Devourer. It's a bit of a weird one, because given that it comes at the exchange of Vanessa, obviously, yes, it can help against Demon Hunter, because you can just rip out Mutinous or maybe a Moarg in order to delay the combo for a while. But it's not a 0 mana 2/3, which sometimes can be the difference maker in these early games. It could be an extra draw off of the field contact. Sometimes Vanessa even gets you pretty relevant cards against the Demon Hunter. First of all, it is going to be the Miracle Rogue, though, which once again, I do think Mutinous is going to be a pretty big hindrance to Surrender against this mirror match.
That's right. Even if it's just one card different, we have to give more importance to one card in Rogue as opposed to many other decks in the meta, because Rogue and Demon Hunter to a certain extent will almost always see like the bottom 5 of their cards of their deck, because they're drawing so often. And so having that Mutinous actually be a nuisance is something that's more likely to happen. If it stops your field contact train, that's one more card that could have been a Prize Plunderer, for example. Or, sorry, what did he cut? Vanessa? Just something Vanessa, that lets you keep drawing with the field contact. And this opening hand, I think, warrants that very sour expression from Surrender. Oh my god! What is that?
I think I have to be sick. That is disgustingly bad. Whereas on the other side, I think I also have to be sick, but for the opposite region. Like, this sounds pretty good. I guess it's not the absolute nuts. There's no field contact yet, and...
Oh no! Are you kidding?
That's the next worst card he could draw. Impressive, Surrender.
This is the worst possible opening hand you can have. I will hear no arguments. There's no worse combination.
I don't think I've ever seen... I've played a lot of Rogue games over the last couple of seasons, and I've drawn very badly. Never this badly. This is a whole nother level. Not like this.
Well, gotta rein it back in, because Surrender, I think, has already moved past denial and depression, bargaining and anger. It's all about what are you gonna do at this point? Probably dagger and proc the Octobot, because nothing else.
I kind of feel like you're supposed to leave it. Like, I don't know. It's so difficult to know, because they might just have a proc. Like, the fact that they coined it out, I don't know if that means that they're more likely or less likely to have the Orc Merchant. But either way, you know, maybe you could try and survive until turn 5 and then Wicked Stab it for rank 2.
It's not about trying to survive, right? It's trying to say, they won't have a proc by turn 5, which is very, very, very unlikely, I have to say. So I favor Surrender just going for the proc right now and discounting the minimum amount of cards, which happens to still be a disaster for him, but he just can't do anything with this hand. English is a funny language, Derek. We use disgusting and sick to mean absolute antonyms, depending on what the situation is. It's all about the context. He can contact and step it, and then Valkyrie's next turn maybe do something.
Yeah, it's definitely the play. It's horrible. It's a disgusting play, as you said, and not in the good way.
Okay, right. Kazakus once again feeling just a little bit awkward. First world problems for blitzchung, just because the golem's not playable next turn, and blitzchung doesn't have the possessy line of being able to step the Kazakus and replay it. But at the very least, he has Octobot and Foxy Fraud for turn 3. So just getting the 5-cost golem online right now definitely seems pretty strong. +2/+2 is a bit tempting here, because I feel like he'll have quite enough card draw with this Swindle for the moment. Could be thinking, though, that Surrender, because he stepped the field contact, is going to have a very strong reactive turn in the near future, so he's not going to get too optimistic with actually buffing a board. Oh, no.
Well, Jandis is a thematically terrible draw here for Surrender, completely unplayable, and makes his field contact turn essentially useless here, because the only battle cry he can play will bounce the field contact back to his hand, which makes it unplayable anyway.
Tarek, this is unbelievable. I don't know if you could have shuffled the cards in any worse manner for Surrender. Like, if we had to play a Tavern Brawl where you give your opponent the worst deck possible, like, this is not the worst deck possible, but you can arrange it in such a way where it does look like the worst deck possible, and that's just what happened to Surrender here. This turn, as much as I want to throw up talking about it, feels like it's Wicked Stab and Dagger into the Kazakus and then re-Dagger.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, this truly is one of those one in every 200-300 games you're going to see a hand this bad. Like, you have to play a lot or almost deliberately mulligan into it to get this unlucky. But either way, blitzchung is going to give no quarter to his opponent. You got a bad draw? Boo-hoo. I'm still just going to beat you down. Because he has many alternate ways to go about this. And honestly, I'm looking pretty heavily at this point at Octobot and Brain Freeze your own Octobot just to vomit more stats on the board.
Well, it's not that many additional stats he can vomit by Brain Freezing the Octobot, right? It's a Foxy Fraud. So I don't quite think it's worth it just yet.
That's fair. Yeah, maybe not quite. Especially as the Foxy Fraud makes the Swindle cost 0 anyway next turn. Or in 2 turns.
Yeah. I mean, my thinking for this is that he doesn't even need the vomit stats game plan because he's already just winning. The Golem also, crucially, is not buff board. It's draw 2. If it was buff board, then yes, I'd be fully on board for just getting the Foxy Fraud down. But Surrender has once again whiffed on a Battle or combo card. I don't believe this, Dara. What? How is this possible?
Yeah, I mean, you know, very often I will hear the criticism that players will say casters try to talk about decisions that wouldn't have mattered over the course of the game because they just got unlucky. And like very often, you know, yeah, that's correct, but some decisions might have improved your chances even if they wouldn't have actually made a concrete difference in that game. There is nothing Surrender could have done this game. He just got absolutely screwed. There's no two ways around it. If he gets back into this game, it will be a miracle of astronomic proportions.
I regularly lose to like 2%, 3% lethals in Battlegrounds. This feels miles less lucky than that even. I don't even know. I've never seen a rogue draw this bad. He does have his own Octobot now, but blitzchung can not only vomit stats, he can draw his deck.
Yeah, the rush is pretty sick as well, to make sure that the Octobot does not proc. At this point, again, kind of looking at Brain Freeze my own Octobot again, just so that they can't go Jandis into rush or draw the Wicked Stab or whatever. Just because as long as you get the discount, this hand almost can't lose, right? Your next turn is so disgusting.
Yeah, I like it now. There's a lot of discounts here that are quite relevant. Even stepping his Neophyte, sure, just eliminate secret passage outs for Surrender if they even existed.
Sure.
I don't know if they did. Oh, not brain freezing the Octobot though. Okay.
Yeah, it's fair.
Best possible Jandice in the world. Rhino and Earth Elemental?
Raz and Aegwin still wasn't good enough because it would only have got up to 3 AoE. Yeah, Moonfang and Earth Ellie, I mean, that wouldn't even be that good. I mean, this is not a terrible Jandice, but of course, barely even scratches the surface of what blitzchung is able to do here.
Dude, if I were blitzchung, I'd be wondering what the heck happened this game. Nothing! Absolutely nothing! He's just kind of dead.
Yeah.
Like, blitzchung is too off lethal right now.
Yeah, still no mana. Oh no, wait, double Wicked Stab? Is that just
Yeah, it is. Sorry, with the Octobot discount. I forgot that it was still unprocced. That was a massacre!
You hate to see it in such an important match, but for Surrender, he still has another chance. Still the Demon Hunter left to go. You know, one of the least games of Hearthstone I've ever seen. That was just as bad as you could possibly get. Honestly, I know I keep saying it, but I just cannot get over that does not happen as Rogue. You have these kind of sort of dead draws. They're never as bad as that. And so Surrender taking the loss there, unexpected, of course, given how, or the expected outcome, given how things were looking at the start. But against the OTK Demon Hunter, this is where his version of the deck may start to shine. That one Mutinous over the Vanessa gives him an extra out in addition to the already established very strong game plan against Demon Hunter of just overwhelming them in the mid game.
Alright, there is a Mutinous in there. I still can't believe that this game went so poorly for Surrender and we didn't even get to see Mutinous. You're talking about how that one card might hurt your chances a little bit in the mirror, and it's all about trying to eke out percentages and average what is the best percentage across the board when you consider the other matchups, but it all just came down to the worst possible normal Rogue draw. Mutinous not even included. blitzchung got thrown a bone there. I think he will know it, especially when he watches back the VOD, that he just got very, very lucky in the sense that Surrender had absolutely nothing to do in the early game, but it's not over just yet. It all comes down now to this matchup you talked about, Derek. The Grandmaster stats do have the Rogue as a slight favorite in there. The Demon Hunter still has its teeth, though. I think it has a lot of possible draws that can beat even the Golems back-to-back and also just get lethal turn 6, turn 7. But we saw a while ago from blitzchung, maybe a bit less willingness to go for very high risk plays that allowed him to survive one more turn, but maybe threw away his win condition for the overall game. You're not allowed to do things like that against Rogue, though. The macro decision making is super important. Timing when you go for the big removal, whether or not you're able to play around Neophyte, and of course getting the skull down as early as possible.
That's right, and as we can see there from that factoid about Surrender, we know that he has been one of the most successful players in Asia Pacific. Like over in the European region yesterday, Soto was talking about how for Tyson RDU as two incredibly strong competitors and streamers, the World Championship title is really the last accolade that they have yet to put in their trophy cabinet. It kind of feels like the same has to be said about Surrender. He has done so well over the seasons of Grandmasters, so well previously in the HCT system, 2 appearances at the World Championships, and just playing lights out Hearthstone throughout. I really hope that he is able to get there and finally get the win. But at the same time, as I was saying, blitzchung, one of my favorite people in the Hearthstone scene, and I think grinding away has not had the most successful run overall in Grandmasters, rocking a below 50% win rate for most of it. This season, though, things are finally starting to click, and with Skull on the left in the final game of the series, he's got himself a decent start already just with that one card to get rolling.
For Surrender, things are already looking turned around. Octobot, yes. 2 of them questionable if you don't have like good payoff cards.
Yeah.
I'd be in favor of definitely keeping 1, but against Demon Hunter, it's also a matchup where they're really not bothered about proccing it until they can actually kill it.
Double Octobot gamer, 16 hands all flying directly at your face. And with no field contact, this hand is not quite the nuts yet, but it's just a single draw away from being the absolute perfect hand. Double Octobot plus the field contact plus the activators. This is the polar opposite of what we saw from Surrender last game.
This is the money. You could see from Surrender's expression, he put his hands to his heart, took a deep breath, and said, I have a chance this game this time. He got given absolutely no reprieve last game, but now he's given the tools, but it's not the easiest thing to piece together. How does this curve actually pan out? Is it Octobot into Octobot starting this turn? That seems pretty decent, even if you get the discounts on repeated cards. Like if one of them is field contact, then you easily recoup that value, but he's saying no.
It did seem good, for sure. There are few ways that your opponent can answer Coin Octobot into Octobot. It gets a little bit easier come turn 3, because then they can start going for Moog, Throwglaive, Talented Arcanist plus the Throwglaive. But it does mean he gets to keep the coin. So this field contact turn, if these Octobots can survive, are looking to be even more impressive.
Starting to be a question of, is it even second Octobot this turn? Because double discounting the hand he has currently maybe doesn't feel as strong as parsing out the discounts over whatever he draws from the field contact. So I could hear the argument for holding on to one Octobot, but I'd like to see this first one get procced sooner rather than later, because we are approaching territory, especially with mana banked, where blitzchung can kill this off without proccing the frenzy.
Yeah, very easily. Next turn with Moog Throwglaive, you could kill off both of them without having to worry about proccing the Frenzy. So I do like that Surrender, using up a Battle Cry off this Orc Merchant, but proccing the Octobot, he knows, is more important. And setting up with the draw here again for the mother of all field contact turns.
Does he end with second Octobot, though? It's kind of hard to imagine it gets the proc on it, and he would be discounting, yes, field contact and swindle, but I think he can actually afford to be greedy with the second one and discount things like the Alex Tenwu combo for a bit of insurance later on. It's also like getting to a point where if you are popping off with field contact, you might need targets for the prize plunderers, and so Octobot is like a target that you actually want to shoot with your own stuff, whereas nothing else in the deck is like that.
Yeah, and so next turn, field contact, Octobot, shoot your own Octobot with the prize plunder. It looked tempting, but blitzchung, you'd have to imagine, is going to be taking this opportunity to deal with the Octobot, but I'm wrong. He's just leaving it up, doesn't want to go for the Moog. I guess if you've already seen one discount, again, I'm kind of working with caster vision here, where Surrender has the perfect Octobot hand, but from where blitzchung sat, maybe he just can't activate it and you can deal with it in the next few turns.
Maybe, but oh my goodness, is this turn going to be a pop-off? Or is it? Usually with Surrender, if he's going to do a lot of actions in a turn, he already starts. He's done the thing by the time we've talked about it, because he knows that a lot of branching decision paths could happen. So if it's not Octobot this turn, if it's not field contact this turn, is it like coin swindle? Okay. It is field contact.
It just has to be, right? And I think holding on to the coin is probably pretty valuable, because you're going to be drawing so many cards this turn that Coin Jandis is a very real possibility, or even Coin Mutinous, if you want to go for that in the next couple of turns as well.
Let's check a Il'gynoth in hand.
It could be. That could just be the solo win con for Surrender.
And this turn, almost the entire deck drawn. Look at this. Foxy available. I guess at this point, there's nothing he even really wants to combo out. But Coin held on this entire time because there's Jandis. Even if you float mana, it's perfectly acceptable to make sure he has the next board. Because right now he's a little bit weak to Immolation Aura, or even just Throwglaive. But blitzchung also putting together the skull now. He has Il'gynoth Moarg. Arcanist discounted? Wait.
It's getting there.
There's philosophy as well. It's not next turn, but it's really close.
Yeah, looking like he's going to have to play the Raging Fell Screamer first next turn. But for blitzchung, he probably has time to do it. Like, there's not that much pressure, especially when you factor in the Eldraki Warblades that can go alongside this as well.
does have time against Coin Jandis, but does he have time versus Coin held for Mutinous? Turn 6? Oh, I don't even know what Surrender's supposed to do here. Like, because the Jandis looks really, really strong, but what if he's been holding onto this coin for Mutinous? What if?
I mean, it's not like his turn is bad here. Just going Foxy into Mankrik is acceptable. 6 extra damage on the board is, you know, it's not nothing.
If he had another way to proc Octobot again, I would heavily look at Step Octobot and like play Og Merchant on it so he could get Jandis down and retain the Mutinous for a turn cheaper. But that's not available. And so this is the crossroads, right? Is he holding onto coin for Mutinous or is he going for Jandis right now for maximum pressure? He saw a skull. On average, they're very unlikely to have the combo this early. Actually, I would retract that statement. Sometimes it is going to happen. Not turn 6, but like turn 7 is a relevant breakpoint to think about with a skull having been played. So it's really, really difficult to say. Surrender's just going to go for the Jandis here, which is strong against a non-immolation aura hand, which currently there is none for blitzchung.
Okay, not bad at all. Thinking about Shadow Step, again, it's obviously good with Jandis. Not bad with Mutinous either, though. If you wanted to go for the full Munch game plan, you could go Mutinous Shadow Step, Mutinous Tenwu Mutinous. It sounds kind of like a meme, but if they don't have the combo in that time, you can just have a very high chance of killing them with Il'gynoth. But with that pickup of Fellscream Blast, it's still at least a turn away. But Blitzchung's getting close.
I grow impatient.
I mean, if it is just a turn away, then it's before Mutinous can come down. So, I mean, obviously he wants to get the Raging Fellscreamer down this turn, but there's a lot of stats on the other side while thinking about that. And so, can he afford to play one Moarg? Okay, 2 philosophies now? Okay, wait, he picks Kurtrus. So, he can get rid of the... Wait, but the Kurtrus is not... Okay, it's okay, you can still play it even without Immune. Sorry, I was confused by not philosophy there. That felt like a very good spot to get another Moarg.
No, this is fine to have just the one Moarg because he has, as long as he can, deal with the... I was going to say as long as he can deal with the Greybow. He still had Il'gynoth, Moarg, Talented Arcanist, Ethereal Org Merchant, plus the Fellscream Blast next turn that would have been able to deal... 24 damage, right? Plus the swing would have given lethal.
Right, but I do think he had to use Fellscream to deal with that board. So I was in the world where like you would have to clear that board. I was thinking another Moarg is better than Kurtrus. Maybe he took the Kurtrus in order to like deal with the next board because currently Blitzchung does not have lethal next turn. He has +3 spell damage on this I-Beam and then double, which is only 12. Even with the weapon swing, it's nowhere close enough. Surrender can very easily kill off this Moarg with the Brain Freeze. And then, because he's not dead next turn, we're getting into Munch territory.
Oh my god. It could be that one tech. The monster of the Wailing Caverns could be Blitzchung's doom. But Surrender, of course, has to survive up until that point.
Well, the Kurtrus is not doing very much here. I don't know if Surrender's deliberately positioned for it, but it's pretty good. The Foxy's in the middle. Yeah. That's the only minion that immediately dies to Kurtrus here. My goodness. Okay, spell damage again? So let's say he goes Raging Fellscreamer next turn. He can go like Thalnos, Moarg. So it's like +4 spell damage on the I-Beam and double. That's still just 14.
14, yeah.
Not enough.
Yeah.
We're munching. We are munching.
I think we are. I don't see anything better. You can go for Dig for the Cult Neophytes off of the Secret Passage. But I think Surrender knows his best chance is just the Mutinous. Oof.
Okay. Failed first Munch. Are we stepping the Munch? Blitzchung, hand to heart. This is
I think you are.
Practice partner. but it's also one of his last few opponents to possibly make a run at Worlds. This means so much. Surrender is going for another try next turn. But
he's got just enough mana for double proc as well. He can go Mutinous, 10 with Mutinous, 2 chances eating it up.
Oh my god. How much is this? Is it it? I think that's it.
I think that was the draw.
Oh my god. No way. I-Beam first, yeah, and then Arcanist and Fellscream Blast. That's just the lethal. Surrender had 2 more munches next turn, but it's just not getting there. Blitzchung with the Fellscream Blast off the top is going to be our second finalist facing off versus Possessi.
So brutal there for Surrender. If he'd hit Moarg, obviously he would have been able to survive the turn. Il'gynoth, of course, instantly wins if he's able to get it. Even just the talented Arcanist, I think very possibly could have bought him that extra turn, right? It was just Thalnos that was not good enough there, and oh my goodness. It is going to be Blitzchung going through to the finals. It's yet another very close but ultimately unsuccessful attempt for Surrender to become our world champion. Such an incredible turnaround though, and just because he was able to avoid avoid relegation, get into playoffs, he will be able to come back next season and give it another shot as undeniably one of the absolute GOATs of Asia Pacific. But we have our final set, Gia, Possessi and Blitzchung. He was laying it out in his interview. Blitzchung kind of happy that Possessi stole his #1 seed because it meant he had to face less Japanese players overall. He sees them as the absolute terror of Asia Pacific right now, and he has the chance to turn things all around, take back his rightful spot at first place in Asia Pacific this season.